Hey guys, it's the AP World Guide here. I'm back again for our fourth episode and our first lecture. So let's begin. Okay, so today I plan to cover the Paleolithic Revolution and kind of what defines and creates this era. The Neolithic Revolution. Do a comparative essay, kind of introducing how to write it and putting it into effect after I discussed it in the last episode. And there's some practice questions to see if you're paying attention. And it helps. And wrapping it up, giving up some links and references that I use, and crediting information that I kind of borrowed. Okay, the Paleolithic Revolution, paleo meaning old Stone Age. And this period is defined by humans traveling in bands with each other and with their animals. They depend on their herd for survival. So the people, or these nomadic bands, would stick to their animals, and if they moved with them. They use these animals for their fur, their bones, their meat, and those animals were essential to their survival. Their main religion, they're kind of like animistic, so they believe that there is a spirit in every living thing, in the grass, the rocks, the trees, the mountains. That everything has a spirit, everything's alive and should be taken care of. And between the genders, they were very egalitarian. So both the men and women had to cooperate to bring in food for each other, to keep everything surviving. So the women gathered berries, the men went and gathered meat, and both of them worked so that everyone could eat. And the population pretty much stayed low because they had to work so hard to get a certain amount of food, so the population wasn't allowed to grow. Okay, the Neolithic Revolution, Neo meaning new Stone Age, so this is different from the Paleolithic. This is the revolution, which is defined as the discovery of agriculture. So in this period, people are now learning how to manipulate the land so that they can make an excess in crops, an excess in food. So this allows for population growth. And then as they're utilizing the land, they're using slash and burn agriculture. So they're taking everything in the land and burning it down to make more fertile land to grow food. And then now, instead of just following their herds of animals, now they're breeding them so they can have more animals to use for meat, for clothing, and they don't have to travel and move around with their herds anymore. Since they're not moving anymore, now they're settled down. And now that they're settled down, people are now doing different types of labor. Like you've got your smiths that are making certain weapons, and you have your early forms of merchants that use barter trade. And now with different divisions, now you're having a gender split. Now everyone's being treated as quote unquote equally as they were during the Paleolithic Revolution. Now women are put down. Now women are working into the fields. Now men are allowed to explore the horizon with different careers. The women are still subjected to stay at home and to work and take care of the family. Okay. Also in this time period, you have metals being produced. You have copper. You have bronze. Copper for jewelry and simple tools. Bronze for weapons. So when we look at the first civilizations next week, you're going to see how all these metals help with plowing, allowing for more crops to be made, and just to help mankind. Then you have pastoral nomads. And you have barter trade, and I explained, where I trade you a certain good for another good, not with money. Like if I have an excess of berries and you have hammers, we'll trade. That's barter trade. And pastoral nomads, they tend to live within the steppes, and they live with their herds and their animals, and they travel around. During this period, the settled agriculturalists and the pastoral nomads trade for things, and actually the pastoral nomads end up exchanging now and money items, but they exchange diseases. And a good example, which is a little too early to mention, is the Mongols. They were a specific band of pastoral nomads. They lived with their animals, and they travel around. So people that stayed with Paleolithic ideas, I guess, if you want to say so. I couldn't specifically find a comparative contrast topic for this time period, because most of the time you are not going to receive an essay on this, but just to review and to keep the information fresh in your head, I came up with one. So the question is, compare the dependency of food supply in the Paleolithic and Neolithic revolution. So the words in red are the key words we want to be paying attention to when answering this question. Dependency of food supply in the Paleolithic and Neolithic revolutions. So now, once we figured out what the question is asking, we need to start planning. So the Paleolithic revolution is known for this egalitarian gathering and how they interact with the genders, being dependent on their herd, eating for constant food for survival, and constantly moving. The Neolithic revolution is known for depending on crops, growing in population, job specialization, domesticating animals, and move and kind of in a way mutating, but not really, mutating the crops and a need of food for survival. Okay, now that we've settled all the information and started figuring out and planning how we're going to write the essay, now we need to put all this, now we have to pull all the information from our brain and start writing our comparative essay. So we're going to need either two comparatives and one contrast, or two contrasts and one comparative. But really it's up to personal preference and whatever you can write. So if in this case you could write two contrasts and one comparative, I suggest you do so. Okay, so for my thesis, I wrote, the Paleolithic and Neolithic revolution is defined by the supply of food and how it's obtained. Both the Paleolithic and Neolithic revolution depend on animals and nature in order to survive. On the other hand, during the Neolithic revolution, society was able to increase the amount of food, while the Paleolithic had to work with whatever the environment had to offer. So what I put in red is my comparative statement, how they depended on animals and nature to survive. So that's two comparatives. And in blue is my contrast, how their work output had to increase or decrease depending on what side you're looking at as my contrast. When you're writing your thesis, don't fluff it. You want to keep it straight to the point. But when you're writing the main points, your comparatives and your contrasts, keep it vague. If it's vague, it's easier to then elaborate when you're doing your body paragraphs. So vague when talking about comparative and contrast. But when you're leading into it, don't try to fluff it and make it sound nice. Just jump straight into the question and straight into the point. So before we start our practice questions, take out a piece of paper and a pencil and start writing down your answers. Because after I read all the questions, we're going to jump straight into the answers in the review. So at any point, make sure you pause the video, and read the questions and then keep going. Okay. So the first question. Pastoral nomads are similar to settled farmers in that they both A. Grow crops, B. Domesticate animals, C. Settle into larger communities, D. Have job specialization. The Neolithic revolution influenced greater gender roles in that men and women's economic roles were deemed equal, B. Work outside the home was more highly valued, C. Women no longer worked, or D. Men played the only significant economic role. 3. The change to an agriculturally based economy as a result of the Neolithic revolution was A. Gradual, as it took hundreds or thousands of years, B. Developed in one part of the world and spread from there, C. Was universally accepted throughout the world, or D. Had little impact on the environment. Number 4. The development of agriculture led to an increase in population because A. Farming was much less labor-intensive than hunting and gathering, B. The stable food source allowed for more permanent homes and larger families, C. Farming provided a healthier diet than hunting and gathering, or D. Hunting and gathering was an extremely dangerous lifestyle. Okay, the answers: 1B, 2B, 3A, and 4B. So let's review. Question number one. Pastoral nomads are similar to settled farmers in that they both A. Grow crops. That can't be true. Pastoral nomads moved with their herds. They didn't grow crops. The only ones that grew crops were settled farmers. C. Settle into large communities. That only applies to settled farmers because now they had an excess in food, so then they were able to build their communities. Pastoral nomads had to work and forage for their food. There wasn't enough so that their population couldn't grow, so their communities were small. D. Have job specialization. That really only applies to settled farmers. They were able to make enough food that everyone could start branching out into different tasks. Pastoral nomads depend on everyone to get food for survival, so job specialization can't apply to pastoral nomads. Domesticate animals. That works with both of them. They both depended on animals for survival, and each function of the animal served as a necessity for both pastoral nomads as they moved from place to place with their herd, and for settled farmers that stayed relative to one location. Okay. Number two, the Neolithic Revolution influenced gender roles in that men and women's economic roles were deemed equal. Well, that's not true. You could say they were egalitarian in the Paleolithic Revolution, not the Neolithic. And as you keep learning in history, men and women's economic roles will never be equal until you get to late 20th, early 21st century. C. Women no longer worked. Not true. Women did work during the Neolithic Revolution as husbands or the males in the group uh, partake in job specialization. D. Men played the only significant economic role. That's not true. Women were dependent on raising the farm and taking care of the crops. They served a vital role, but they never got any benefits. Work outside of the home was more highly valued. That's true, as more people are learning about job specialization since crops are growing in excess. Life was more fulfilling than working outside than it was working with the crops. 3. The change to an agriculturally based economy as a result of the Neolithic Revolution developed in one part of the world and spread from there. Not true. Even though agriculture is based when humans started developing around river valleys, agriculture was spread evenly throughout. If you look at the Americas, where North and South America, they had agriculture. Some weren't even close to water sources. So you can't really say that was a general statement for everyone. Was universally accepted throughout the world. Mm, That's also a giant general statement that you can't really apply. Has little impact on the environment. Actually, the Neolithic Revolution incorporated slash and burn techniques, which hurt the environment. So it had a huge impact as people started growing more crops and destroying the land to grow more crops. So it's impossible that this had no impact. A was gradual and took hundreds or thousands of years. That's very true. Because the Paleolithic took a good portion of world history, and then because of the Paleolithic revolution, it took an even longer extent of time for people to learn how to use the land and benefit and make more crops for themselves so that they can make an excess in food. 4. The development of agriculture led to an increase in population because hunting and gathering was an extremely dangerous lifestyle. If it was a dangerous lifestyle, population wouldn't have grown. And hunting and gathering has nothing to do, well, it has nothing to do with the development of agriculture. It was that desire for excess of food that led to it. But hunting and gathering didn't lead to specifically agriculture. Agriculture was just the need and desire for more food. C. Farming provided a healthier lifestyle than hunting and gathering. Actually, hunting and gathering was a healthier lifestyle because they had a variety in crops. In crops and food, as they had food from the settled farmers. They had food from nature. They had the animals they depended on, so their diet was healthier than farming. Farming was much less labor intensive than hunting and gathering. That is true, but that doesn't specifically answer the question about how the development of agriculture led to the increase in population. So the last option, the stable food source allowed for more permanent homes and larger families. With an excess of food, more families can grow in size, and more people can specialize in jobs. So excess of food equals an increase in population. Well, that's it. I hope this video was helpful. So check out the Twitter at AP World Guide for daily questions and tips. Also like, subscribe, and share with those that you know that are taking AP World History. Happy studying!